Welcome to a new episode of These Go to 11. Let's turn it up. Hey everybody, welcome back to These Go to 11, an unchurchy conversation about everyday faith. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and review on your favorite podcast platform. This not only helps us to get our content out there, but also helps us to find out what you, our faithful listeners, think. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to These Go to 11. Once again, I'm Nathan Bell. Joining me as always, Greg Dutcher. Greg, what's going on, man?
Dude, welcome to No Shave November. I see you're sporting a little facial growth.
That's right.
As am I. I started my No Shave November in October.
Nice.
I don't know about you, Nathan.
Getting an early jump on it.
Oh, for me, it's lazy November.
Oh, yeah.
I hate shaving.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Yeah.
And what a first world complaint.
Right.
But it's what Taylor Swift would call a champagne problem. I hate shaving.
Yeah.
So often, and even Lisa, after 29 years, has probably just given up. It's probably a better, more, a positive way to put that. But it used to be, Saturday night you're going to shave for church? Nah, I don't care. Right. I'm going to go on there and basically wear my sweat clothes.
Right.
Open up the scriptures, preach, and let the shag just be all over, my countenance. But.
Well, the good news for you is, I don't know if this is good news for you or not, but you're aging enough at this point where it's all one color.
Thank you, dude. For the longest time, it's still a little there. I had the triple. I got red and brown, black, white, a little bit of gray. It's pretty much all going that whitish gray.
Yeah.
There are some advantages, and I mean some, capital S, some. Very few advantages to getting old. But yeah, my son started No Shave November on the 1st. And he goes, Dad, you going to do it? And he said, you should shave. I said, no, I got a head start.
Right.
I started October 20th and going to keep it going. We'll see. It gets to the point where it shags up so much.
Yeah. You've got to do a restart.
Yeah, and I might do that.
Yeah.
I might do that for sure.
Yeah, I'll see how long I go. Underneath the neck, I've got to keep that shaved.
Yeah.
So I'll do that, but we'll see how long I grow it out on the face. So.
And you know what I'm hoping for, Nathan? We'll let our wonderful listeners tell us.
Yeah.
Please tell us, especially if you're listening to this cast in the car.
Yes.
Right before we went on today, our tech wonderkind, young Stephen Smith, was doing something on your computer.
Yeah. He set up some kind of filter on here and worked his magic and
audio boost something.
Yep. Yeah. So we'll see how it works.
Because a lot of people do tell us now, dude. When I listen to the podcast, I am often listening to it on my phone in a quiet room.
Yeah.
But most people probably listen in their cars.
In their car.
Yeah. And they just plug in Bluetooth or aux or whatever. And I know a lot of people have told us they have to crank it.
Yeah. And that's interesting because many of the people that I talk to, they're like you said, they're listening to it in a quiet place. They've got their earbuds in or something. And I've asked multitude of people, and because we have gotten online complaints about it. And I've asked people, no, I don't have any problems with the sound. It works. And you're right. I think what it is, it's the car.
It is.
And I don't think I've ever listened to it driving to and from work. It's usually I get to work, set up in my office, and then I'm listening to the episode we just released just to make sure everything came out okay.
And it always sounds fine. Yeah, so if it doesn't sound good, then we're going to be like the doctor when you go to him and say, Doctor, do you have any advice? Every time I move my elbow, it hurts.
Right.
Yeah, don't move your
elbow.
Don't move your elbow. So listen to
Every time I listen to it in the car, it doesn't sound good. Don't listen to it in the car.
Don't listen to the car. Problem solved. So we'll see.
We're continuing to work and improve everything that we do. So
yes,
we'll continue to make sure that we get better and better.
Yes, just like you and I are getting better.
That's
and
right.
better.
That's right.
Let's just say that when our wives aren't present, and see if we can get away with it. No, honestly, Nathan, November, just to tell you what a Christmas nerd I am.
Yeah.
I remember being a little kid. I wonder if anybody else has had this thought. Maybe this is just my weird thought. When I got to September, I used to thought, oh, now's kind of the time you can start talking about, the back nine, so to speak.
Sure,
I can call it that. And you're heading into the holidays, and that trifecta I always loved of Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas.
Yep. OND, baby.
Yes, and I may or may not have, meaning may, taken out my parents' old Andy Williams Christmas album in September and played it when nobody was around to hear a song or two. And I always remember, dude, you go to October, and the ending of the month changes, and then I always remember November 1st thinking, we're back to the embers.
Yeah.
Which is maybe the nerdiest thing ever.
Hey.
But I'm just throwing it out. You probably never had that thought, did you, dude?
For us, it was always, we were always strict after Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Maybe Thanksgiving Day.
Right.
So as the day was kind of winding down, maybe you're getting into the afternoon, we might put, those song or two on there. But I'll tell you what, today I had Hark the Herald Angels Sing stuck in my head because our choir is practicing that, and they're working on that for Christmas. And of course, if you're doing any kind of Christmas thing, you're already working on that music now. So Carol of the Bells and Hark the Herald Angels Sing were promptly running through my head the rest of the day. So.
Oh, I love it, dude. I love it. Yeah, it's nice this time of year. You start hearing those things. I will tell you, dude, on Halloween Day proper, we did a podcast for Halloween, but I don't think I said it then. I was at Walgreens, maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I popped in because Lisa texted and said, oh, I actually didn't get any candy. I said, yeah, hopefully there'll be some left. And there was a good chunk. How weird is this, dude? Halloween Day, 2 p.m., I duck in there on my way here to church, grab a couple of bags. They're already discounted.
Oh, wow.
On Halloween Day, and above all the Halloween stuff on like the top of every shelf was all the Christmas stuff.
That's crazy.
Isn't that nuts?
You walk into Walmart or, Home Depot, Lowe's, and they've already got a huge section of their Christmas stuff set up and ready to go.
Dude,
and that was basically the end of September.
You're right. And just to let everybody know, as of November 2nd, Starbucks switched to the red holiday cups.
Oh, did they?
Yes, and I made sure to get my annual peppermint mocha. Which, honestly, dude, I love the first sip. It's like a liquefied York peppermint patty.
Yeah.
And then after that, I'm like, why am I drinking this?
Yeah.
It's a little, even for me, it's like a bolus of pure sugar.
Yeah.
And, I tend to be just a coffee guy. But anyway, that's all the intro for November, dude, other than our theme.
Yeah, other than our theme. But in fairness, while we have been faithfully dropping all of our podcasts, it has been a minute since you and I have sat down and got caught up and talked with one another.
Quite a long minute, dude.
So
we're kind of doing that in real time.
Doing that in real time. But yes, November, we're looking at, I don't know how else to put this, but some obscure verses, right? Is it kosher?
Yeah.
Is that term kosher to say obscure?
Obscure verses, maybe cryptic texts.
Yeah.
Those sort of...
You kind of read them and you gloss over them and you look at it and you're like, huh. But hanging on them and pondering them.
Yeah, head scratchers in some ways. We're like, what is this?
Yeah.
What is this happening? This isn't ours today, but I've always been... I remember as a young Christian, probably 16, 17, when I was first starting to read the Bible, I still remember, I think I remember where I was. It was a real aha moment. Paul's incidental reference in 1 Corinthians 15 to baptism for the dead.
Yeah.
I was like, what? Yeah. And I remember just having often study Bibles, not always, dude, have great notes except on the verses that you really want to know.
Right.
Which is probably telling you something.
What is this thing?
And I think I found, and of course back then, that was 86, 87.
Yeah.
Pre-internet, a lot harder to find things unless you could get to a Christian bookstore and find a commentary or maybe ask a teacher at church that you think might have done some work on this. And my goodness, today, dude, I take it for granted. Just hop on our phones.
Oh, yeah.
Go to 1,000 sources. Not all great.
No.
But there is no shortage of proposed sites that will offer their explanations. So we are going to do our best.
Yes.
To have those conversations on some of these cryptic verses.
Yeah. And hopefully we're also got a couple of gentlemen in the wings, as it were, who will join us for a bonus episode.
That'd be fun.
That kind of relates to some of this stuff too. And so we'll get into that and talk a little bit more about that as we move along. But November is cryptic texts, obscure Bible verses, whatever you want to call it. Our first one that we're going to be looking at today, actually, we start in the very first book of the Bible.
That seems right.
And we're going to start in Genesis chapter 6. Greg, I think you're going to take us further back than that, but our text actually starts in Genesis chapter 6. And many people would be familiar with this story, potentially. This is leading up to God's decision to destroy the world by a flood.
Yes.
And so we read in Genesis chapter 6, starting in verse 1, when man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. Verse 4, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. And then if you continue into verse 5, the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So much to talk about even right there.
Yeah.
So the Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Mm-hmm. So, Greg, talk to us about this. We Nathan, essentially have these.
Thanks for having me on. Right. Man. I can't wait for the next cast. Yeah, go. Yeah,
we essentially have this word Nephilim, and that's what we're kind of focusing on today. Is this term, the Nephilim? And there have been, I don't know how many movies and video games that have speculated this. I think probably one of the most common conceptions of this that is out there is that these are angelic beings who have mated with humans, and they've produced these children called the Nephilim.
Yep.
And I think it's fair to say from if anybody's familiar with, like I said, movies or video games, this would be your understanding of who the Nephilim are.
Yes.
And it's also fair to say that there are many in church circles who would agree with you.
Yeah.
That this is who they are. Greg, you don't necessarily hold to that.
No, I don't think I do, dude. And again, these verses and these, obscure passages, cryptic verses, whatever we choose to call them, the head scratchers, again, I think I hearken all the way back to our very first reboot episode.
Yes.
And it's really about, the old adage, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing.
Yes.
So another way we've addressed it before are, hey, in the traffic light illustration we use, the red light issues, they make us stop.
Yeah.
The journey can't continue. If I'm in one lane and you're in the other lane, Nathan, and we're on a beautiful summer day talking through in this wonderful vision, our Porsche convertibles.
That's right.
And you say to me something like, oh, Greg, let's go on this journey together to encounter Christ and behold him and follow him. And I'm like, man, I'm with you, Nathan. And you say, isn't it awesome, Greg, that Jesus is fully God and fully man? And I say, well, no, hold on a second, Nathan. I want to do that journey with you, but I'm not so sure he's fully God. Like, as we've used that illustration many times, that journey can't continue.
Right.
At that point, like, you would care about me, I know, but say, Greg, we got to talk about this.
Yeah.
That's a deal breaker.
Yes.
There is no Christian journey
Yes.
That's a red light issue.
Yeah.
The deity of Jesus.
And it's fair to say, I mean, just kind of going back, we did a podcast on the creeds in particular.
Yes.
And so anything that you see in the creeds, I think it's fair to say those are red light issues.
Yes.
This is church history. This is what has been passed down to us for, I mean, really thousands of years, not just hundreds of years, but thousands of years as, you know, essential. We cannot compromise on this. You put the bullet in the chamber and you put the gun to the head, and I will die over these issues.
Yeah.
But then we talk about another part of the journey where, okay, we agree on all of these things.
Yep.
And we continue our journey, and then we come to the yellow light.
Yes.
And the yellow light is what, Greg?
I think of them as convictions. If the red light are absolutes, go to the mat, no compromise issues. Deity of Jesus, truthfulness of the Bible, salvation through none other than Christ. You know, these core issues that we just have to really say, when you're outside of those things, it's something else. It's not historic Christianity. But the conviction issues are always tricky because they are issues, I call them yellow light issues, because we're coming to that intersection. You don't need to stop, but you should slow down.
Yeah.
We should listen to one another.
Yeah.
And I think in those cases, whether that's two brothers or sisters in Christ talking about predestination or free will, or they're talking about charismatic gifts, are tongues and prophecy still normative today? Are they not? Things we've addressed on this podcast before. Those are issues that, as you know, Christians will have. I mean, they're lightning rod issues.
Yes.
Very strong convictions, strong opinions that we may have and disagree with one another. But at some level, we step back and say, wait a minute. We don't need to break over these issues.
Yes.
We need to listen to each other. I think we need to do our best to articulate. I always say, I think I got this from my father, who may have gotten it from Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. But until you can articulate another person's position, one that you disagree with, to a point of their satisfaction, you haven't listened well.
Yeah.
And I love that, because I have tested that. I'll say, is this a fair representation of your belief on this issue? And you state it, and you listen to what they say, or they listen to what you say, and hopefully they'd say, yeah, no, I think you captured that fairly.
Yeah.
Or, you know, you've got most of it right, but I wouldn't phrase it the way you did at the end.
Yeah.
And then you try again. That's good listening.
Yep.
And we can do that because these issues may have implications, but they're not deal breakers.
Right.
They don't put somebody outside of historic Christian orthodoxy.
Right.
And then a quick one, dude. Preferences are green lights.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, dude, I just love this type of music. I love contemporary praise music. And somebody says, oh man, I prefer hymns. We just keep blowing through that intersection, dude. I mean, no interesting conversations. Nothing that we need to even really, other than say that they're preferences.
Yeah.
You know, dude, the guy in the church that I love, Matt, not Matt Smith, another Matt, one of our former elders. I'll say it, Matt Fonte, good dude. He loves what, I can't remember what it's called now. It used to be called the New American Standard Bible. Now it's under a new name.
Yeah.
And I can't remember. Maybe one of our listeners can. He and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago in church. He was showing me a verse and how it renders it. So, that's really, I see that a little different than the ESV. But I'm sure Matt would say, those are preferences.
Yeah.
You know, those are preferences. They don't even, to me, rise to the level of conviction.
Right.
So all that quick background, or maybe not so quick background, this issue of wherever you, our listeners, maybe land or get interested in this topic, I'm going to give my best attempt at defining who I think the Nephilim are.
Yep.
And I feel pretty confident that I'm standing on scriptural grounds, logical reasoning, biblical deductive reasoning, even inductive, I would say. That does not mean I'm right.
Sure.
I have not heard from heaven on this issue.
Right.
This is not a red light issue. Dave Shive, a good friend, mentor, has been on this podcast, would completely disagree with me on my take. And notice we conveniently left him out. Sorry, Dave. We just couldn't dignify your substance. No, I'm just kidding. So, dude, if I may, with all that, did you want me to say anything else on all that background?
No, I think that's perfect. It's to show, and I think we're going to find that many of these verses are going to be like that.
Agreed.
In order to get more information on the Nephilim, you have to go to some more obscure books that are not considered biblical canon. I believe, doesn't the Book of Enoch talk about this? These are part of the Apocrypha.
Yes.
So the Book of Enoch talks about these things a little bit more. And in fairness, the Book of Enoch was read along with Scripture historically as, would it be fair to say, almost a historical book that gives you some context to the time frame that these things are written in. Is that kind of fair? Like, this is Book of Enoch, we might say, is more of a historical book written around to give historical context, but was not canonized with Scripture.
No, it's much like the New Testament Apocrypha, or I'm sorry, the Old Testament Apocrypha, like Maccabees, first and second, particularly first. First Maccabees, scholars tell us, is an invaluable book to know about what's called the intertestamental period, pretty much post-Malachi, before Jesus. Those roughly 400 years, you get some really valuable information about the Roman Empire's encroaching upon the nation of Israel and their dominance over the entire world, which sets the stage for the New Testament. But we can look to that for historical information, interesting facts, archaeological, historical reference, but we don't look at it as authoritative Scripture. So, but it doesn't mean we don't look at it as a tool. All right, dude. Well, maybe I should say this. A common view of this passage, and I'm pulling it up right here, dude. Thank you for reading it. Obviously, this is all the setup for the flood. Noah's Ark. Where we have God expressing displeasure, as you hinted, which could be a 10-part podcast series itself. Does the Lord regret things? And my short answer to that is that it is, to use the fancy term, an anthropomorphic term. Like man. Much like the Psalms that talk about the nostrils of God. I don't believe, according to what Jesus says in John 4, that God, presuming God the Father, is a bodily being. He doesn't have nostrils in that sense. In John 4, Jesus says God is spirit. Those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. But it's an anthropomorphism. It helps us understand, the sacrifices, whether they are pleasing or they make God wince due to their hypocrisy, etc. It's an anthropomorphic expression that I think captures God's hatred of sin. That's what I think is trying to be communicated there in Genesis 6.
And there's a sense, too, when you as a parent look at decisions your children make and you regret those decisions, you're not actually looking on those things with regret. It's a way we would use mourning. I mourn over this decision that has been made. And it's not necessarily like, I regret my child being born and making this decision. I regret that they are mourn that they're making these decisions.
And you wish they'd done it differently.
Right.
That's a great example, dude. I think it speaks of God's emotional heart towards sin and what it does to his creation, including us. So this is all set up for that incredible moment, that sweeping flood. So verse 1, when man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters are born to them. So we've got most would agree, a quick reference to the ever-expanding human population. Verse 2, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive. Many have thought and argued that sons of God is a reference to angels, which it can be used. Book of Job as an example. The sons of God attending, as it were, the court of God's sort of command center. And Satan himself comes in, and Job is itself a tricky book, and we have to determine what's figurative, or at least have the conversation to know that there's a framework of debate. But sons of God is used sometimes of angels. So an interpretation of this passage is that the angels saw that the daughters of men were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. It appears that verse 3 seems to express, again, God's displeasure for this decision. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. So many people think that this is angelic and, dare I say, demonic, because these angels, obviously, if they're having sex with women, and there is a very disturbing little element, the ones that they chose, whomever they chose. And it may very well be that marriage is a euphemism here for sexual intimacy. So a traditional interpretation is that here we have a passage where fallen angels have sex with women, and the offspring of those relations are seen in verse 4. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days. But let me go back to verse 3. I find it interesting that it says, the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years.
Yeah. Which
is a radical reduction of the lifespan.
Right.
Because you're seeing Methuselah making almost 1,000 years, dude. It's incredible. And you're seeing a lot of these saints named earlier in the story living centuries.
Yes.
120 years seems to be a reduction in man's lifespan that I think could reasonably be argued in some ways comes out of this great wickedness.
Yeah.
I find that strange if it's angels or demons who force themselves upon women.
Right.
The other reason that I'll just tell you, Nathan, I find it strange is because Jesus tells us in Matthew 19 that it's a tough passage. The Sadducees try to trap him because they disputed the concept of a resurrection. There's a woman who is married to a man, and he dies. And then her brother, custom called levirate marriage, steps up, marries her, he dies. And then the third brother steps up.
It almost turns into like a Comedy Central sketch.
7 grooms for one bride, right? You know, something like that. And they all die. And the whole point is to entrap Jesus.
Yeah.
And they say, so at the resurrection, who's she going to be married to? Yeah, which one? Because the most logical choice would probably be the original or the most recent.
Right.
Or maybe somebody in between, but who? And Jesus cuts right through all that and says what? He says it's not going to be like that in heaven. The angels, he says, we will be like the angels who are neither married nor given in marriage.
Yeah.
So I've always had kind of a tricky time believing that. I know it's kind of I want to be mindful of children listening. I don't see a Rosemary's Baby thing happening here.
Right.
Especially since the judgment is not upon these sons of God that are allegedly angels, but appear to be on man.
Yeah.
Then we've got the Nephilim, who are on the earth in those days. Now, my note here, I'm looking at my Bible app, great app here, you know, it's just called the Bible app, right? And put out by YouVersion, and Life Church, I think, does it. And the Nephilim, when I open it up, see what it says there, dude? Or giants, right? And I don't know if that's New York or San Francisco. The text is not making that clear.
That's right.
Nephilim has been translated as giants in some other ancient literature. Its etymology, however, is pretty simple. Im is always plural, and neph is to fall. It's the fallen ones. Now, I will concede that is used in some other literature to represent giants. That's a big subject in itself. But notice verse 4, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. So some argue that the Nephilim are these giants, and they would argue that, well, look, that seems to be reinforced. The mighty men, the men of renown, and it could be, if they're talking in terms of physical stature. But it seems as though the sin continues. They are having sexual relations with women. They're having children. But look at verse 5 again. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth. Every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And there it is again. He regretted that he made man on earth. I will blot out man whom I have created. I am really hard-pressed to believe that this started with some kind of angelic, physical engagement with women.
Yeah.
Now, I'm really going to back it up here, dude, when I go back to Genesis chapter 4. Chapter 4, we've got the Cain and Abel story, right?
Yep.
And, of course, we've got Cain, who's jealous of the godly Abel, the brother. We don't fully know what. I'm convinced there's some shorthand going on here.
Yep.
Abel brought a grain offering to the Lord that pleased him. Cain brought a meat offering to the Lord that displeased him. We don't really know why. Maybe something to do with the state of their hearts. The text doesn't tell us. Cain is jealous. He rises up in anger, kills his brother Abel. Eve is grief-stricken, of course. She's lost her son at the hands of her other son. Verse 25, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called his name Seth, for she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. To Seth also was born, a son was born. He called his name Enosh. And this is the only comment made about Seth's offspring. At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. Now, if you back up, I know I'm covering a lot of ground here in chapter 4, Cain's offspring, they accomplish some pretty cool stuff. And the text wants to point this out. One of the descendants, Lamech, took 2 wives. The name of the one was Ada, and the name of the other was Zillah. Ada bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all those who play the lyre and pipe. Zillah also bore everybody's favorite baby name for a Christian family, Tubal-Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. In Cain's offspring, they're marked by worldly accomplishment.
Yep.
We've got agriculture. We've got civilization. We've got music. We've got innovation.
Yep.
Bronze and iron. Coming from the worldly line. Then you get down to Abel's offspring, replaced by Seth. What does the text say? At that time, men began to call upon the name of the Lord. I think what's being introduced here in Genesis are 2 lines in humanity. And I think that's in keeping to something we're going to cover next month, dude, in our Christmas episode.
Yeah.
That there is a promise made to Eve that there's going to be a coming battle, the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. And there's going to be, I think that's foretelling, there's a godly line and an ungodly line. That is always the tension through all of Scripture. The history of Israel. It's always there's a godly line and an ungodly line. So when I get to Genesis 6, and I'm skipping over a lot here in 5, which is also important, I just see a continuation that the sons of God are a reference to the godly line. That compromised and fell. And there were children that were born. The Nephilim, the whole giants thing, I don't know. I will admit there's some cryptic uncertainty there for me, but I believe, Nathan, what we're seeing is they're the men of renown because like Cain's offspring, they're pretty they're pretty tough dudes.
Yeah.
They're warriors. They're great leaders. They're strong men.
Yep.
But the Lord is not impressed.
Yeah.
And he's going to pluck one family from that godly line, the one man, Noah,
Yep.
who finds grace in the eyes of the Lord, and he's going to start over.
Yeah.
Again. Now, what we're going to see is out of that offspring, we've got two lines.
Right.
And that continues to go all the way through. So I'm very much a believer that I don't look at Genesis 6 and find this cryptic, interesting, who's this race of giants? Did Goliath come from this group? I see it in scriptural context, what happens when those who are to be following the Lord deviate from their path. And it was so significant that the Lord brought judgment.
Yeah. Well, and again, all of that, I think you're right, hinges on Genesis 3:15, which we're going to actually, like you said, we're going to explore that next month when we get into December.
You only got to wait 1 month.
You only got to wait 1 month. But it is so imperative because you read through Scripture, and what is every parent is looking at the son that's born and saying, this is my salvation.
Yeah.
Salvation has come to me because this is the promise that was made. And so everyone's theology at this time is hinging on that promise that God makes to Eve.
Yes. Yes.
And so it makes sense when you follow the line and the pattern down when you get to Noah, because again, it's Noah's father is Lamech, right? Another Lamech.
Yep.
And he says the same thing. My salvation has come. And ultimately, it's going to be true. God is going to use Noah to deliver the human race to safety.
Absolutely, dude. And if you think of that picture, which Peter references, the ark itself becomes a picture of Jesus.
Yes.
Right? Saving humanity.
Yep.
Because Jesus is the ultimate descendant of that godly line.
Yeah.
The one who, because the godly line, here's the thing, what we know, dude. They're godly in that there's the grace of God given them. I always loved Noah. Noah wasn't just this self-righteous guy. He found favor in the eyes of the Lord. The God showed him sovereign mercy and kindness, which he did not deserve any more than anybody else. And it changed him, but we see Noah sin. We see David, part of that godly line, sin.
Yeah.
We see everybody, who is part of that godly line, blow it until we get to the one who does not blow it.
Yep.
So I actually think the building blocks of the story of the gospel are here. Now, in deference to my friend Dave Shive, who's not here, there are some really wonderful people. Dr. James Montgomery Boyce, I just mentioned him in a sermon recently, dude. Yep. He's the guy that, if you remember, I tried to see when he preached at 10th Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia. He passed away in year 2000. And in the 90s, I had 3 opportunities to see him, and every single time.
Don't you hate that?
He wasn't there. So, and then I think somebody said, you'll hear him in heaven. I was like, I doubt he's preaching in heaven. Nobody's going to want to hear me preach in heaven. They're like, yeah, Dutcher, we're here. We don't need your subpar preaching anymore, right? We got Jesus. We're glory. So in one sense, I'm like, man, all the preaching is done.
Right.
Because now we see him. So I thought, well, I won't get to hear him. But I've heard him on tape.
Yeah.
So
at least you had that.
I had that, and he had this gravelly, thunderous kind of gravelly voice, Dr. James Montgomery Boyce. And he was a scholar. So I want the audience listening to feel free to research this and look at this. I've given an argument. Now, I was greatly influenced by Dr. Robert Vinoy, who was my Foundations of Biblical Literature professor at seminary, because I just still remember, dude, sitting in that classroom September of 1993. I was probably, 23 years old, my first year at seminary, spellbound when he walked through so carefully with overhead slide after overhead slide, the lines of descent and how consistent that theme is. And for me, it all clicked.
Yeah.
But I will be the first to say, Lord, I might get to heaven one day and find out I was wrong. Yeah. And I'm just going to be happy to be there.
Right. Well, in fairness, right, the position of the Nephilim being this mixed, angelic human hybrid, giants. We have legends, and the Greeks, I mean, all the gods that you see throughout history, whether it be Mesopotamian gods or Egyptian gods, Greek gods, Roman gods, you look and you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, and all these fantastical things that have occurred with these superhero-like people, right? And we've talked about this before, that in every legend, there's truth to it.
Absolutely.
And so, it does cause pause to contemplate, where did these legends come from?
Yeah.
Where did these superheroes come from? It had to be more than just, the flights of fancy of, these are just the gods that I've made up, and so they're just better versions of myself, right? There's something that had to be in there. And we do see people acting supernaturally, right? I mean, you get Samson, right?
Yep.
Samson and Delilah. And Samson does some supernatural crazy stuff.
Yeah, his story reads very much like a origin superhero story, doesn't it? It's interesting. And I'll say, dude, look, Goliath, the text is pretty clear, appears to be about 9 feet tall.
Right.
There's some debate on that, whether it was a genetic defect. I don't think we'll know until heaven. But the other argument that I did hear, I think Randy Alcorn say, might have been in his book on heaven, that I must say was an intriguing thought, was that just as the ages are being reduced, are we seeing the effects of the fall on man, not instantly, but over generations?
Yeah.
So was there, this goes back to the 70s, dude. You might remember from reruns, We Can Rebuild Him.
Right.
$6 million man, right? Bigger, stronger, faster, smarter. Right. Were our ancestors bigger, faster, smarter, stronger?
Yeah.
I would not be shocked if that's the case.
Sure.
And you see the fall over time. There, you see the age limit be reduced.
Yep.
Why not see the physical and mental capacities of their abilities reduced? So maybe in this ancient world, we're getting here. Now, that still doesn't necessarily have to justify the angelic sexual encounter with women, which I still just have a hard time processing. Well, but there's something there.
Right. And that's difficult on multiple levels, because it's not just the idea of, you talked about very, very clearly stated from Jesus, given in marriage, we will be like the angels, not given in marriage. But also, we are a completely different species.
Yeah.
And that needs to be thought through. The fact that, when you consider genetics and the leaps we've taken with genetics and understanding what genetics are, we know that there are only a few chromosomes that separates us from monkeys, but those are significant enough that we are a completely different species from monkeys.
Yeah.
And so you think about angelic beings that are created by God. I mean, in the descriptions of these angelic beings, I cannot fathom that we are DNA genetically compatible to be able to do something like that. It
doesn't seem that way, dude. Now, I was looking here earlier. A bunch of different interpretations. I don't know if this is anybody of note. There are some people that suggest, well, could there be a mediating option that these demonic beings possess human beings to engage physically with these women? I don't know. At some point, you just start kind of scratching your head and wondering, well, yeah, but it said sons of God. And if you're arguing they're angels, at what point do we, it becomes strange. The idea of the men of renown, because we were talking about that before the cast, my argument would be that fits with the descendants in Cain's line that are marked by worldly accomplishment.
Right.
And it's almost as if, yes, the world would look and say, whoa, some impressive stuff. Look at the cities, the armies, the innovation, the technology that they brought to the world, and they certainly did. But look at Seth's legacy.
Yeah.
There's a group calling upon the name of the Lord.
Yeah.
By the way, if our audience can, do you hear? I hear it so clearly in the microphone. We have our Life Skills 101 group meeting while we are recording this. So we may hear some background festivities.
We may, but I don't think it's usually too bad when things happen. I think we usually get, but yes, we do have some festivities going on, and
yes,
it is November, and so there will continue to be festivities. So if you hear people celebrating as we're doing these podcasts,
that's our background.
Just know that's our background. So, well, Greg, this has been a great episode. So glad we were able to explore through this obscure text in Scripture.
Yes. Can't wait to do next week's.
That's right. So looking forward to it. And until the next time, we just rock the Casbah.
Nephilim style.
Thank you again for listening to These Go to 11, an unchurchy conversation about everyday faith. Once again, please make sure you like, subscribe, and review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you ever find yourself in the Forest Hill, Maryland area, please feel free to stop by at 135 Industry Lane, and you can get all of our service times and information at christfc.org.
These Go to 11